baby shark.
Mommy shark, do 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 do, mommy shark, do 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 do.
Reverend MeeLing. Reverend Susan MeeLing. Susan MeeLing. Lady MeeLing America, Lady Dori, Belle. I've been known by a few different names, quite a few. And I was told by a variety of individuals that I'm such a rebel in different things and just so boisterous in other ways. And in certain regards, okay, I agree. I mean, I guess. I didn't really think I was all that rebellious. So I'm gonna go over a few different ways in that regard. I admit I can look back in 2020. That's what year this is. It's the 19th of May in 2020. And I can look back and be like, okay, I could see that being ish. I mean, comparatively, but even still, back when I was told this, it was one of those, I guess. So, so one example I can give is, Lady Dori, Belle, you are such a rebel for having that haircut. I mean, I've seen other people with haircuts kind of like mine. So, I mean, maybe not, with the little wispies, but, I mean, I've seen kind of similar haircuts, Well, you're such a rebel for having tattoos in the state of Texas, both in regards to in the vanilla section where we're being called, Susan, as well as in the lifestyle communities, Lady Dori, Belle, such a rebel for having tattoos. There are tattoo shops. Like, there's more than one in any of the cities. I don't think that's really all that rebellious. Just saying. Anywhere, let alone in the state of Texas. There's quite a few tattoo parlors, tattoo shops. I've seen them. I've gone to them, obviously. Nonetheless, I've seen a few. A few. So I don't see how that makes me rebellious. Well, what was another one? Before I get to the big one. You're such a rebel for wearing corsets. I'm not the only person who wears corsets in the state of Texas. I've seen people who wear corsets. I have. You're such a rebel for wearing corsets. And they were being derogatory. It's not like they were, being, like, oh, wow. It was like, you're so a rebel, in a sarcastic, but like in a mean sarcastic, not a funny or a fun sarcastic, like a mean one. It's all in the tone of voice. There are those who understand that. So it's just, and doing that beforehand, that's a big tell. It's a big tell. And so, you're just being you. Yes, I tend to do that. I tend to be me. Yep. I don't know how to be anybody other than me, so there's that, and then, why do you have to just, okay. Whatever. Sure. You're such a rebel. Okay. That's what you think makes me a rebel. I can think of a whole bunch of other things that I would think would be a little bit more rebellious, ish, and one person out of many. Well, what would make you more rebellious-ish? Well, it wasn't in the state of Texas. Well, what made you such a rebel? Well, like I went scuba diving this one time, and I mean, it really wasn't being rebellious. I mean, not until it happened, and then, it wasn't really technically being a rebel. Okay, well, what'd you do when you were scuba diving? Well, all the scuba divers were told we weren't allowed to go inside of the Vandenberg. And so, when I got to the bottom of the ocean, waiting for my dive buddy, I mean, I went and swam around the ship, and, but I didn't go in. So, ish. Kind of rebellious-ish. I mean, that wasn't my plan, My plan was to go into the ship, but, I didn't allow that. So, so that was me being rebellious-ish. Because, like I was really nervous when I surfaced. Well, why were you nervous when you surfaced? Because I didn't want to get in trouble with the scuba diving police, duh. Duh. That's how I was like rebellious-ish. That's not really rebellious. I thought it was. That's why I said I didn't want to get in trouble. I mean, I just don't want to get in trouble, period. However, I thought that because I was told specifically that I couldn't, go inside of the Vandenberg, that was kind of like, no, that is not rebellious at all. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Never mind. Apparently, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, fine. Just go on my merry little way, whatever. And alright, whatever. So then, I had a couple of people actually tell me this, and especially those when they found out. So, this is where I could see being rebellious, but still being respectful. So, I was told that the Texas flag could be hung higher than any other flag in the United States. I was like, I don't think so. What do you mean? Texas flag being hung higher? What? Than the American flag? Than the American flag? Than the American flag? Well, yeah, no. So, first part of my rebellion, I don't know if it's so much of a rebellion in this regard, but being told that the Texas flag could be hung higher. So, I don't think so. So, my rebellion was hanging the American flag higher. That was my rebellion. I don't know if that's really rebellious. This next part is. So, in the state of Texas, at my house in Carrollton, I did it. I admit I didn't do it when my now dead ex-husband was alive because I had discussed doing that and I dealt with a conversation. And so I didn't. But in my house in Carrollton, yes, I hung the New Jersey flag and the Texas flag at the same height. I took the little, so it had the two thing, the two flag holder, put them even. I was like, that's right. That's right. I mean, technically half New Jersey, half Texas, making a joke, not a negative joke, but realistic because of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I was raised in New Jersey, and then I woke up from the coma in Texas and had to relearn everything, so I was like, that's my rebellion. Not really all that rebellious, but for some people, yeah, that was like, who do you think you are? Waving your New Jersey flag equally to your Texas flag. Me. Me. Like, I'm the only person who's lived in more than one state. And, like, no, I'm not. I just happen to be one of those few individuals who have been raised in one state and then, like, had a dream on Palm Sunday in 2000 and woke up in another state and had to be re-raised in certain regards. So, yeah. What? And besides, it's a pretty flag. I mean, realistically, it's a pretty flag. It's a pretty flag. It is. It's got the 2 females and stuff like that, and all the swords and knives and anvils and you know. And as many people were like, "Oh, you're a damn Yankee." What'd you call me? You're a damn Yankee. That was. Why am I a damn Yankee? I had a lot of people actually tell me that. I had a lot of people, like, from the time of essentially buying my house in San Antonio, all the way up until about 2012. And it was one of those, I'm not a damn Yankee, but you know what I am? Ironically, what? I'm a motherfucking Yankee. Because you're not going to tell me when I leave the state of Texas. Irony. In that regard to what happened in 2013, nonetheless, yeah, I was looking at going to Florida, or at minimum Georgia, because I wanted to see the Emerald Isles. I wanted to see that green water. I really did. It's one of those, green water. The ocean? What? In the ocean? What are you talking about? and you know, after that whole scuba diving thing. And so, you know, but I did. That was where I thought I was rebellious. I thought I was like, yeah, I'm the one. Yeah. But I'm equal. I didn't try to New Jerseyfy Texas. No. Still respectful. Just acknowledging where I came from. Just saying. And then it was also, you know, because, and you know, some people might not understand that, and then there are those who do. Where I came from, in New Jersey in specific, had the largest amount of commuters to the World Trade Center. Why I joined. So it was one of those, I didn't grow up in New York. I grew up going to New York. I grew up in New Jersey. And a lot of people, you know, they had a lot of sympathy in certain regards for people of New York. Yes, no denying the sympathy deserved because of everything that occurred. However, not everybody that worked in New York lived there, that was affected that day. A large amount of them actually lived in New Jersey. Not saying that there weren't those who commuted from Pennsylvania either. However, the Tri-County area that I grew up in had a large amount of people that commuted to the World Trade Center, actually, to be more specific. There were a large number of others who commuted towards New York, but the largest commuters to specifically the World Trade Center were from that Tri-County area. And there were people who didn't understand that. They were like, no, they just lived in New York. No, not everybody lived in New York. No, there was a large amount of individuals who lived in New Jersey, commuted, whether they lived just across from the Holland Tunnel, just across the bridge, just across whatever, or several miles in, because it is a small state. And so, while, yes, no denying New York had that aspect, no denying that at all, the amount of people that actually commuted from New Jersey because of the taxes, because of the living arrangements, the ability to actually have a yard, some square footage in comparison. Look at the price for a condo, an apartment, or what have you, in comparison to a house mortgage payment in New Jersey. And you can have, yeah, you have to maintain the house, yeah, you have to maintain the property and all that stuff, but you know, okay, a couple hours of commute, all right, and then, you know, you get to go home and sit out on the back patio, enjoy the backyard, whatever size that might be, in comparison to, you know, having to stay in your apartment. And apartments and condos in New York, you don't always have a patio. Like in the state of Texas, a lot of times, in any apartment that I've lived in Texas, you have the ability to have a patio. Not every apartment has that. Not every condominium has that. Not every townhouse has that. That's actually a luxury addition to that. And so, you know, it wasn't to be disrespectful. In certain regards, yes, it was a little rebellious, but it was still paying homage to where I came from. It wasn't to be mean to the people that were in my neighborhood. It was, you know, this is where I'm from, you know, and I'm not forgetting where my roots are. Not in one side or the other. It's both, you know. And not only that, you know, by the time I bought my house in Carrollton, how many people were, I mean, before even buying my house in Carrollton, how many people were forgetting or annoyed because of the date of the 11th of September, and how many people, I mean, I cannot count how many discussions I've had with people, and not even specifically on the date of the 11th of September, but just in a general discussion of how tired they were. It's like, yeah, well, okay, but there are people who, you know, despite the fact that, yes, there is the saying, never forget, there are some who will never forget that particular day. There are people who will never forget that week, that month, that year. It's just ingrained in them because of how close they were to the involvement, and or their people that they knew. And they didn't even have to be specifically in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Virginia, more North Carolina, but also South Carolina, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And then Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island as well. Yeah, you didn't have to specifically be in that main section to have a direct impact. Because then you got all those people who were, as far as like the airports and stuff like that, and the airliners, then you got all the military guys, law enforcement guys. But then don't forget that there are civilians that they could have been working as far as Alaska and had people there. Whether they knew them personally or they were part of their business and, you know, were working in that vicinity. And so, while I had multiple discussions with people, I'm so tired of hearing you talk about New Jersey. I'm so tired of hearing you talk about New York. I'm so tired of hearing about you repeat yourself over and over again. Well, then don't listen to me. But those who choose to forget, by choice, you're doomed to repeat the same things. And so while you might be tired of hearing me say what I said, that doesn't change the fact that those individuals won't forget that day or that time. The people that were in that area, they will not forget the smell of that smoke. They will not forget the sounds of what they heard, whether it was screaming, whether it was a building falling, whether it was just debris falling. They will not forget what they saw. They will not forget what they felt. You know, the people that were running, you know, and covered in soot and ash, they will not forget that. They haven't. They have moved through those aspects, but they still remember that. They will not forget the taste in their mouth of the ash as it flew in the air. That's the reality. And so while you might, you know, have your issues in regards to thinking that I'm rebellious for having my New Jersey flag flying, I am paying homage not only to where I came from, but all of them. Because that's where I grew up. I grew up going to a lot of areas, but I specifically grew up in New Jersey. Thankfully, I haven't forgotten that because of the issues when it comes to my Palm Sunday 2000 head injury. However, okay, yeah, I admit, it was a little rebellious, but there was purpose behind it. Very few actually wanted to know my purpose for flying my New Jersey flag. Very few even cared to understand. It was usually some sort of, and it wasn't even people that lived in the cul-de-sac. That was the kicker. It was one of those, oh, you have that house. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I'm proud to have that house. That's my house. You have your new, do you know you're in the state of Texas? Do you not see the state of Texas's flag flying equally? Because are you going to tell me that nobody in the state of Texas knows anybody from New Jersey? Nobody has that connection? I doubt it. I doubt it. And when I talked with people, specifically when I was still living in Carrollton, it didn't happen nearly as much when I was in Cedar Park living in Austin. Or going to Austin, but living in Cedar Park, it's within the limits. I talked about that in Dallas. Ugh. Some people, ugh. And others, well, why would you, that sounds weird. Do you want to know, or are you just kind of, well, ish? Let me know when you want me to stop. And I'd start explaining it, and then they'd get to a point where it was like, okay, that's a little much. Like, that's great to know that that's a little much. And whether they knew people in that area or whatever, and that's why it was a little much, that's a whole other ball of wax. But there was that mutual understanding at that point where it was like, okay, you are not, you know, you are, but you are, ooh. And it's one of those, yeah. And I didn't see any issue with it because, you know, I mean, how many people would, if you look at sports, you know, not everybody, you know, you do have your issues in certain regards to being for certain basketball teams or certain football teams, but you still have that, you know, in that regard. And so, and the Super Bowl season, you know, it's not always the same two teams every year. So, you know, people still fly their flags. I didn't see an issue with it. But I could at the same time see it in that regard. And that was my in like real like Gurrar rebellion, that was my rebellion, which I didn't really think was all that rebellious at the exact same time, because it was one of those, I cannot be the only person who has lived and grown up in a different area. I understand the aspects of the head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 not being the average, you know, thing. However, that aspect, yeah, no. when I flew that flag, whether it was talking about New Jersey, despite, it was the way that I could remember. Where it was one of those, I knew I wasn't the only one who had, certain connection points there. And as many people, in the state of Texas, I doubt that there are many people in the state of Texas. Maybe they didn't go to New Jersey per se, but they went to New York. And I doubt that there's nobody in the state of Texas who has never been to the state of New Jersey. I'm sure there's probably a couple of people, maybe a few, possibly. I mean, other than, me. And it wasn't to cause problems at all. Not at all. And by technicalities, I think that being a rebel technically means that you're trying to, I think that's what it means. But it really wasn't to cause problems. It was one of those, I acknowledge where I'm from, I acknowledge who I am, and having the American flag above in height, having them equal in that regard, it was important to me. It's important to acknowledge both equally, and not in a negative way, not being mean. I know that most likely because of my issues. Like, I might have accidentally, just tilted it the wrong way because I forgot to use a level. That's my fault. But other than that, it was completely just, out of respect for both. And again, I highly doubt that there are people, specifically, I guess, more along the politician aspect, probably, that would have more of a direct connection in that regard, but more possibly in reference to Washington, D.C. itself, obviously, if they're going out there for work. However, I mean, how many law schools are in the state of New Jersey and the state of New York? A lot. You got Princeton, you got Rutgers, so you got the aspects of scientists that went to Rutgers University, you got lawyers, you got all sorts of different degrees in Rutgers, you got Princeton, can't forget Princeton, obviously, I think Brown is in New York, but you got Rutgers, Princeton, Harvard, I think it's near the borderline, and that's just a few. And so, you have at least however many years it takes to earn a law degree out there. And so, it realistically wasn't to be rude. It was one of those, that's where I'm from. And to try to not allow that or have a negative opinion of that, that's your choice to have a negative opinion. But if you're having a negative opinion because I'm from New Jersey and I remember, and I didn't discuss with many people back then in regards to what I did specifically on that day. The majority of times when saying I was in San Antonio, oh, well then, you weren't affected. You don't even know. First off, I'm not the only, and that would be the point where I would just forget to even discuss anything about what I did. You don't even know how many people who had, moved to the state of Texas before the events of 9/11. And so, in your flippant comment in that regard, you are disregarding them and their family and their connections. In just that simple little thing. And again, not forgetting the individuals who, whether they lived, and there are people that lived in Texas and commuted. You know, they'd stay out there for like the weekdays and then come back on the weekends. So, you know, I didn't go into detail with realistically at that time from 2001 through 2012, realistically, I didn't discuss what I personally did on that day. It just instantly would go to, and what about these people? 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 So very few people, if any at all, knew who I spoke with, who I had gone to discuss what needed to be discussed, make recommendations where I could. It realistically, I will admit, it realistically wasn't until I put it in writing that I had really gone into that as far as my first two books. Because that particular aspect, not that it wasn't important to discuss at all, it was just more along the lines of, well, if you're going to be that way about just the fact of me discussing where I'm from, I don't even need to go any further into that. Because if you were to actually know, you don't know, because you're not allowed to, you know, because, and in some ways it's because you won't even allow yourself to know that, because before I can even get into that aspect, you are belittling and degrading those points. And so, okay, well, if you don't care about me, well, what about them? Because if you're not gonna, okay, fine, you don't like me, you don't like the way I look, you don't like my tattoos, you don't like A, B, C, D, F, G, whatever. Okay, fine. I've had a lot of people that didn't like me over the years. You're not the first, you're not going to be the last. Especially at that time. So you're not going to be the first, because there have been plenty you got to beat, you know, like my biological mother. Got to beat that, and you can't do that. So there's that. And you won't be the last, because, you know, inevitably, you know, at some point in time, whether, you know, it's because of issues coming up and then, you know, me responding and then you don't like what I have to say, or you just, you know, in this reference, you know, you don't like the way I look, you don't like the way I speak, you don't like the way I this, that just, again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's one of those, that's your choice. You know, and so it's one of those, there was, you know, that aspect where it was like, you don't know what it actually took for people on that day. You don't know what people had to do. You think it's just as simple as some people said, you know, George Bush this, or this person that. No. You know, oh, well, he should have done this. Oh, okay, so while he was being president of the United States of America, he had to do what? You know, like, he was given, you know, orders where he could. His people were doing what they could at that time. And everybody was in such a panic that, and rightfully so, there's no denying that. But you want to blame this, and no, you're not paying attention. Oh, well, you know, if this, you know, this was a conspiracy. No. You need to remember there was the 93 attack. They did a Band-Aid equivalent, because the 93 attack happened in the basement, and they could only do so much to have the materials that were utilized back when the building was first built, not forgetting all the different contractors at the time, to the time that there was the 93 attack and what was done, you know, as far as damages are concerned. You're not taking that into consideration. You have to take that construction point into consideration, you know, because yes, okay, in certain floors, yes, there were whatever materials here, there, and whatever. But at the same time, you also have to take into consideration the 93 attack. And that was in the basement, which is the equivalent of the foundation. So you have a break in the foundation and you change that. I mean, I'm sure there are construction guys who understand that much better, can explain it so many different ways far better than I. But nonetheless, that is the reality. You have that fact that you have all of those different points. And so at those times, whatever it was from, the time of 2001 all the way to essentially 2013, that was not discussed with people by me as far as that, in regards to what I did. And not that I thought it was a big deal. I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't. However, I was not on the ground in New York. I was not the one who was calling, the different air towers and telling the traffic controllers which way to do what. I was not the one who had, said who goes where as far as which law enforcement branch to check whatever. I am not the one who did all that. So to take credit for something like of what they all did, that's what they did individually. Yes, I made suggestions. And yes, some of those suggestions did pan out to be worthwhile. But when in discussion of the aspects of what happened on that day, and especially the first month, that was them, what they did. And so when people would, this, that, it, no. You need to look at the bigger picture. You need to pay attention. Not only you need to look not just at the trees of the forest, but the forest itself. And so, and you can't just look at the trees, because each tree has their own type of branches. You got the grass beneath, you got the different plants, the animals, so on and so forth. There are so many different aspects, not forgetting the ground itself, because grass is not the end-all be-all. You've got the soil and how the roots intertwine and so on and so forth. So while you want to discuss whatever individual points you got, and you want to whine and complain and say, stop talking about that. No, because this is the reality. This is how it is. And if you don't like it, well, you're not taking into consideration all of those different individual sections. You don't like it, that's your problem. That's not my problem, that's your problem. But you wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for those guys who did take care of it. You wouldn't be breathing if they didn't do what needed to be done. That's the realistic aspect. The earth actually would not be here if that wasn't taken care of. Because it's not like it was just New York and then the one plane in the field in Pennsylvania and the one side of the Pentagon. And I tried with certain civilians. It was like, do you not understand that from that right there, that there were other airplanes that were involved with that? Not just in the United States of America, around the world. So, and I couldn't even get to that point with certain people. They just didn't want to, oh no, that's just not possible. But it's the reality. You don't like it, I don't care. This is the reality, and you are tired of just, oh, it's just 9/11. No, it's not just 9/11. The world was restarted completely. Everybody had to reevaluate all over the globe. Some did more seriously than others because of multiple aspects. Nonetheless, to simply just, oh, it's no big deal. No, it's a really big deal. And with as much as people have the ability to move, like I'm the only person who had moved. Not just from San Antonio to Carrollton, but then all the different areas in between before Washington State. No, you got military guys that do that all the time. All the time. And their families. That's how that goes. You got certain law enforcement branches. That's what they do. That's what they have to do. It's how that goes. So for you to be so dismissive and so degrading and so belittling about that, I take great offense to. And I know I'm not the only one. And I really wish that you would reevaluate yourself, because there will be a day where there are people who wind up getting your opinions on that. And they are going to be people who were directly impacted. And if you choose to stay in that same mindset, when that day comes, you're going to have nobody to blame but yourself. At all. And so there were some who would listen a little bit more, ask a few questions, and then, okay, I can't. All right, I get it. I understand. I don't know how to do small talk. I don't know how to do that. That's not something I was taught after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. After my head injury and waking up from my coma, everything was serious. Everything was, okay, well, what's going on with your medical stuff? Don't, hold back, let us know, da-da-da-da. Okay, can't hold back on that. Have to. And as best as possible. When it came to being in medical hold unit, it was continuous, whether I was on restriction or not, it was constant. Like, there was no downtime. No downtime. Ever. I mean, okay, when I slept, ish, in that regard, and then after being out of medical hold and being put on temporary retirement duty leave, well, I still had to do my appointments, but then I also had being pregnant with my son, the aspects of my now dead ex-husband and that, how everyone, as far as that's concerned. And then I still had my medical appointments, not just for my headaches and migraines and the cognitive tests that I was continuously going through, the memory tests, which is part of the cognitive stuff, but not the exact same. And then the neurology, neuropsychology, biometrics, biofeedback, life skills, the MRIs, the CAT scans, the EEGs, the EKGs, so on and so forth. There was no point in time that I've ever had, except, ironically, in scuba diving, where I had like a few minutes to simply just breathe. That's literally all it was. There were a few other aspects, but in comparison, on land, just breathing. Because otherwise, with all of that thought process and mental stimulation, that was it. And that was for the first several years. So, then after, giving birth to my son and doing everything that I could and all that, within like just over a week, then 9/11 happened. And then, where I could in that regard, and then he got sick and he was in the hospital. And so just continuous, just okay. And then because of not being able to sleep in the hospital because of needing to make sure my son was taken care of, and not in a negative way, because obviously, I love my son just like I love my daughter. It's one of those, like, have to do what needs to be done. And so the first 5 days that he was in the hospital, I had maybe like 2 hours of sleep. And so with all of the doctor's questions and everything like that, it was just one of those, yeah, okay. And then, the different staff that would come in that were sometimes in lab coats, sometimes not. Oh, well, what do you think about what's going on? Well, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, in that regard. And so just did what needed to be done, and then whenever he was released from the hospital, about a week and a half later, I was in the hospital. I was inpatient, and I had to also take care of my son because my now dead ex-husband didn't want to be bothered by that. It was too much for him to go to school, and my son was an infant at that time. He was barely at tummy time at that point. So, you know, just saying, he wasn't even a month old by the time that I was hospitalized. And, you know, did what I could do and everything like that. And then with everything that was still going on, obviously, it was one of those, okay, well, you know, doctor's appointment of them showing up, obviously, and all that stuff. Then the continuation of everything else that needed to be handled at that point. And so then later, not by much, got pregnant with my daughter. And so all of that. And so the appointments for me, the appointments for them, you know, making sure that they were taken care of. They had what they needed. They were fed. They were clothed and clean and all that stuff. Cleaning the house, doing the yard work, all so on and so forth. Before the stay-at-home moms group, before the pagan community, before the lifestyle. That was all before that. I wasn't even off of temporary retirement duty leave by that time. I didn't get off of temporary retirement duty leave, or TDRL, until towards the end of 2004. And so by that time, I had the aspects of the stay-at-home moms group and had been in the pagan community, had already been done with the Jade Wolf Coven and that whole aspect, as well as the stay-at-home moms group. The wedding that I had made the wedding cake for that, you know, Felicia chose to throw away. That's her choice. Still don't understand that. And then, you know, that is a personal issue for me. I know that. I know it is a personal issue. However, that was a 3-tier wedding cake, and I realize now that I made it for, like, from the stuff that I've read, probably about 1,000 people by the depths of the cake and layers and all that stuff. Nonetheless, you know, that 3 tiers. And then those who have gotten a pie that I have made, whether it was a pumpkin pie or a caramel pecan pie or a fruit pie or whatever, you know how heavy each one of those tiers were by just that. By just that. So, you know, the 3 tiers and double layered for each tier. You know, I mean, that was, and then the filling, and it's a personal issue of mine. It's a personal issue of mine that Felicia threw it away. Just one of those, like, it was a firehouse. Those guys they'd actually have had leftovers on the first tier. Not even counting the second and third tier with the way firefighters eat, by the way. With the way they eat. Again, 2 tiers for one of the tiers. So 2 layers, I mean. And so, like, what is it? Like 5-6 inches per layer of each tier. Just saying. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, just the first tier, they'd have leftovers of the second and third tier. I'm a little bitter, I know. But that's another one that had issues in accepting the aspects of, and it wasn't even that long. That was only 2003. That was 2003. And it's like, how do you have an arrogant thought as such, just such a short amount of time afterwards? How? And so, again, it wasn't until the following year, much later, closer towards like October, it maybe the end of September, beginning of October in 2004, when their military was like, okay, you're off of temporary retirement duty leave, you are permanently medically retired because of you're just not getting better. And that was the year that in 2004, that was the year that the subarachnoid hemorrhage was fully gone. The MRI no longer picked up on that. Now, the residual damage, of course, is what it is. But that was when it was like, all right, well, you know. So, but all that just before 2005. And so, you know, my own biological family didn't even know. I mean, number one, because they were in Illinois at that time. But even by the time that they came to the state of Texas and moved here in 2003, even by then, they had no idea what I had done as far as who I had spoken with, and then what they were able to do with that. And even they, just Patricia, my biological sister, it's just New Jersey. How do you say that so easily? How? Anna, my biological mother, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But I can't believe you can't remember everybody. Well, you know, had a few things that I've had to take care of. Not trying to be rude, just, wanting to, make sure of certain things and, take care of what I can. My bad. No, I don't remember who you worked with. It's not an offense towards him or his family. Just, quite a bit to deal with, and even with them, trying to speak about that with them was like, it's just New Jersey. Do you not remember how many people commuted to New York? The only person, ironically, that I could actually speak with in a larger aspect was my biological father, Mike, in that regard. And it was one of those. I did freak him out at one point because I had asked him a question about someone that, like a name, and he was just like, how do you know that name? That was before you were born. That was a guy I knew. I was like, oh, I was wondering. He was like, you, what? What was your, and it is what it is. And so it was just one of those, while I was defending so much. And that was before the aspects of after my now dead ex-husband died. That was before that, because that was 2008. And all that stuff. And making sure when going up the chain of command, still being respectful while dealing with my ex-in-laws in certain regards. And it's like, you need to, like, again, Grandma and Grandpa Nichols, my ex-brother-in-law, Tony Walker Nichols, and other ex-brother-in-law, David Osteen, they knew, like, okay, maybe not so much David in certain regards, but kind of. And it was one of those, I will get you information as soon as I can. And then, my ex-sisters-in-law, just in that regard. And then their daughters, mainly Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen's daughters. In that regard, specifically Sandra Marie Osteen, specifically. And so, not saying Ariel Marie Osteen didn't have certain aspects, but yes, seriously. And so, it was one of those discussions that wherever I was in the state of Texas, a lot of times that was just disregarded. And it's like, you are forgetting people are living longer now. You are forgetting that there are ways to assist with things in the medical community now that is not something that can just be gone. It's not how that goes. There are guys, they know, like, you don't understand. You need to be more respectful, because there are guys who, you know, they joined the military before that day. There are guys who joined because of that day, and they were affected. Oh, you have to be so patriotic and just have to care about the military so much. Not just the military. Oh yeah, New Jersey. You know, there are guys who are in the military who are from New Jersey. There are guys who are in the military who were stationed in New Jersey and are. Just throwing that out there. You know, like, you really need to pay more attention. And so, while I understand that there were some who were just like, ugh, your flag from New Jersey, or ugh, you talking about New Jersey. It's not the same as New York. You're right. It's a different zip code. It's a different area code. Does not change the fact that I have the right to have my stuff the way I have my stuff. It may not make sense to you. That's fine. If you want me to explain it, all you have to do is ask. It's going to be a story. A long one, most likely. However, it's still going to be where it is understood. And again, it wasn't like just people from New York or New Jersey were affected, because, again, Washington, D.C. Where is the Pentagon? I thought it was in Washington, D.C. It might be in a different state. It's not very far, though. Just saying. And so, you know, it's one of those, how many people directly impacted? I mean, Washington, D.C., you have every state going there. Not forgetting the UN and all sorts of other stuff. Like, you really need to just take a step back and look. It's not very... Like once you take that step back, you could take a look and see that you're refusing to just take a step back. You want to keep pushing forward. And if you don't take a step back every now and then and kind of look at stuff, you don't see. You're just blind leading the blind at that point. And again, repeating history and that sort of stuff. And it was just one of those, I don't understand. And, oh, well, that's because you're hereditary. You mean the reason why I got my New Jersey flag with the Texas flag and the American flag? You mean that? You mean that? That whole thing that you're like, about? You know, I'm just saying. Just saying. Just throwing that out there. And then I never even got to the point where it was, I actually knew people that were in the Pentagon. That were actually in the Pentagon. Yeah, okay, like who? Like one of the sergeants that I was in medical hold unit with. He was transferred out there. And I had a lot of discussions with that guy. We discussed a lot of religion and spiritual stuff. And because of the last name, how could I even try? I don't know his first name. I only know his rank and his last name back then, if he wasn't promoted. And I was told that's still not important. Whether it was as in the vanilla aspect of Susan or in the community as Lady Dori Belle. Same person nonetheless. So, you know, yes, I guess that's kind of a little bit rebellious-ish to have my New Jersey flag flying at the same height of the Texas flag, but having the American flag above both of them. But most likely, if I did the level wrong, because I forgot to use a level, meaning level, New Jersey was before the state of Texas, founded at least. And not to be rude, just realistic by historical standards. So, still tried what I could to make sure I was as respectful as possible. But also keeping true to myself. But also remembering where people wanted to choose to forget. So, that I could see being far more rebellious than my hair, or my tattoos, or my corsets, or my outfits, or anything else others wanted to pick on. Again, though, I've been picked on quite a bit since very young. So, bet you didn't see that going that way now, did you? So, to end on a happier note, let's see. Oh, I still swam around where I did. That was my rebellion. Though I guess my rebellious aspect of that was taking pictures, because might as well while I was down there. You know, kind of like when off of the area leaving from the port out of Boca Raton. Well, I probably should not be swimming directly over this. It's a little late. So I'll just take a picture of this underwater volcano forming. I'll just do that because, you know, I'm already here. Might as well. Maybe somebody in whatever scuba diving community would like this particular picture, and, you know, we could discuss that later and be like, yeah, so that's that, and, you know, probably not the safest thing to do, but again, I was already down there, and so that was me being rebellious. I'm such a rebel, though still not, because I was already down there. Might as well. I mean, I got my underwater camera. Might as well, you know. I mean, there you go. Click, click. Here you go, marine biologists. Click. Here you go, scuba divers. Click. You know, there you go. You know, here you go, Navy. Click. Here you go, Marine Corps, click. Here you go, Coast Guard, click. Here you go, Special Forces of the Army, click. Here you go, Special Forces of the Air Force, click. There you go. Might as well, I'm already down here, so, you know, there you go. Here you go, NOAA, click. You know. Here you go, CIA, because this is international waters, click. You know, you go FBI guys who go scuba diving. I'm already here. Click. You know, just there you go. Hey, Congress. Click. Here you go, Senate. Click. Here you go, White House. Click. Might as well, because I'm here. And so, you know, I mean, you know, the current's going to push me in the way that it, so, you know, I'm just going to swim. I'm not going to swim around it. I'm just already over it. I'll just, there you go. Hey, volcanologists, click. If that's a thing. I don't know if that's an actual term about volcanologists, but click. Here you go. You know, here's some fishies I found. Click, you know, whatever. Not saying that there's Air Force and Army guys who are in Special Forces who don't go scuba diving. Not saying that at all, just, click, there you go. I don't think it's really that rebellious because I'm already down here, but click, might as well, because who's going to stop me? Not nobody, because ta-da. And so that's a lighter note, right? So rebellious ish. Kind of. Think that's rebellious ish. Anyway, you guys have a good one.